Thanks, Beth. And actually, I'll be focusing on the Nash-and-Mawatney for most of the presentation. So, happy to come back later and do something on Texas City, but for now, we'll stick to Nash-and-Mawatney. So let me share my screen. Let's get started here. Okay. All right, can everyone see that?
Yeah, it's great.
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, we'll get moving here. The Nash-and-Mawatney Prairie are both remnant coastal tallgrass prairies. They were, the reason that they still remain is they were actually hay meadows, which is a fairly common method in Texas of having preserved some of these remnant prairies in different parts of the state, but it's a fairly common agricultural practice in some ranching communities that areas would be set aside exclusively for hay production. So the area was not plowed or grazed, and so that's really why it remains in such good condition. However, there isn't no disturbance on it, and people are surprised to learn that there are actually two pipelines buried under the prairie, so it's not completely immune from the modern ways of how we live. But it is amazingly, it's really hard to find pipelines are at. So it's I'm not sure how they did that. I would love to go back in time and see how they put those in, but whatever they did, they were able to not cause a lot of disturbance. Maybe invasives weren't as prevalent back then, and who knows, but whatever reason, it really has recovered well. The prairies were part of the old Kitty Nash Gross Ranch, and that was a big part of ranching culture in the area since 1800s, the first settlers. And it came to be owned by the Episcopal Church in West Columbia. After Kitty Nash Gross died, she had left it to the church, and they were able to recognize that as ecologically valuable, and then eventually, due to the efforts of Susan Conity and the late Reverend Peter Conity, were able to drive that and that effort into putting it into conservation and protecting it, and it was sold to the Nature Conservancy in 2010. One of the features of these prairies, as with a lot of prairies in other parts of the state and parts of the country actually, is it possesses a unique geological feature called Mima mounds or pimple mounds. And it also possesses small pothole wetlands, but the Mima mounds are, no one really knows for sure how they came into existence or what led to their formation, but just basically little sand, natural sand mounds that are dotted throughout these prairies, and they tend to add to the diversity of the prairie by not only having different soil type, but also that slight elevation change can change the vegetation composition on top of the mounds and versus the bottoms. So, and with all prairie remnants, it's a rare vegetation community, and it's not really any one plant, but just the richness of community of plants condensed in a small area that really makes these prairies special. And I also want to mention too, if you have any questions as we go, normally I would just take questions, as I'm going, but I know it's a little harder to do with Zoom. So if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. We can go through them at the end, or we'll have an opportunity at the end to ask questions if you just want to, wait and ask it at the end. So either way works, and I think that'll work a little better with the Zoom format. Okay, so a little bit about the geography. So this is part of the kind of larger coastal plain, which is a fairly big portion of Texas that goes from all the way from the coast to the Balcones Escarpment and kind of Blackland Prairie area. So fairly large area, but then you kind of drill down a little bit within that. And, this region kind of goes by some different names, but the Texas Gulf Coast Plain is one, the prairies and marshes ecoregions sometimes. Sometimes they'll lump it by, sort of going through the South Texas Plain and kind of claiming some of that. Sometimes the South Texas Plain, they'll run that to the coast. I think probably this makes a little more sense in terms of, what you see. The sand sheet down here really drives a lot of, the South Texas Plain, and kind of get up here and then into Louisiana. It's quite different. And so I want to kind of pause for a second, and I think it kind of is something I've started doing is sort of looking at this kind of in a broader context and kind of zooming back in. So let me switch over to Google Earth, and I can kind of show you a little better the geographical context that this fits into. I'm going to switch over here. Okay. So we're zoomed out to pretty much the whole United States, and you see throughout the central area, you see this big kind of pale swath is the Great Plains. Covers a big chunk of the central United States, and the boundary of the Great Plains is a little, shifty depending on what kind of map you look at. I mean, some maps I saw will actually end right here at this Balcones Escarpment in Texas. Some will go all the way down, to the coast, but for the purpose of this discussion, we'll just say it ends at the Balcones Escarpment here, and then that's where the coastal plain picks up. So from the Balcones east and south, you're looking at the coastal plain, and you see the Mississippi Valley alluvial plain coming through down in Louisiana. So we're kind of zooming in. Again, we're down here to the coastal plain, which includes the piney woods, the Blackland Prairie, Post Oak Savanna, South Texas Plains, Chenier Plains, then Mississippi River Delta, and again, that alluvial plain. So all that kind of coming together here. And so we're kind of zooming into our region here. And you see, one of the features of the coastal plains, it's not just, this solid swath of prairie that you might, kind of get the impression of. It's been dotted by a lot of bottomland forests you see kind of moving through. And so you kind of have that kind of crisscrossing of the bottomland forest with the higher elevation plains, which were, a lot of prairie. And same was true over to the east and even into Louisiana. Much of that's been lost, but historically that would have been mostly prairie. So we're kind of zooming in a little further, and again, we're showing up on the map now, and now we're at the Brazos River here. Again, that bottomland forest you see along the floodplain there. Over here you have the San Bernard River, same kind of, you see that still at remnants of that bottomland forest. And kind of in between that, you have this nestled in here, this higher area. A new name that I've seen for this has been the Damon Prairie, which is just kind of describes this little region nestled in between these two bottomland forests. So, so we're kind of into our area now, into this quote Damon Prairie. A lot of this is not prairie, obviously. Much of it's been lost to overgrazing or farming, or you see a big solar farm here. So all kinds of different land uses. So we're kind of zooming in. Let me see to the Montney here. So you have our two prairies we're talking about today, not too far apart. And we're kind of zooming in here. Nash Prairie here. So I'm gonna stop on the Google Earth and switch over to the PowerPoint again. So it kind of gives you some context spatially of what we're talking about here and where we're at. So Nash Prairie, about 345 acres total, 250 of which have never been disturbed or is, pristine remnant. 55 acres were grazed at one time, so slightly degraded from that. And then another 40 acres were farmed, I think for Milo, maybe in the 60s. So some degradation from that as well, but still quite a few nice native plants, even within those fairly disturbed portions. And about 316 species of plant that may have gone up slightly since this number came out, but more or less about 316. I think it was just under 300 are native plants, so a few non-natives in that mix as well. Hard to really describe a dominant grass, but best I could come up with: little blue stem, long spike, yellow Indian grass, big blue stem, and brown seed. So quite a diversity even among the dominant species. And I would even add, I didn't put it on here, but split beard blue stem is another one that is quite common. A few rare and endemic plants. The most famous one is probably the buttonbush flat sedge. Is or was one of the only populations in the United States. And then coastal gay feather is a neat Texas endemic, and Houston meadow rue. And then Wani Prairie is it's much smaller prairie, about 80 acres. Also quite diverse, has quite a bit more pothole wetlands in it than mounds. And one unique thing about this prairie has a large population of Sylvaeus dropseed, which is quite rare for this area. They're more of a blackland prairie species, so it really wasn't known to be a big part of the coastal prairie until they found it here on the Wani Prairie. So Sylvaeus dropseed may have been a more common species on coastal prairies historically. As far as our management prescription that we follow generally, it involves a lot of prescribed fire, some haying occasionally. Either one of those work pretty well. Fire may be a little better, but haying also is a really effective management tool and increases diversity quite a lot as well. Invasive species control is ever present everywhere, it seems like. And then we've been doing quite a bit of seed harvesting as part of a kind of a restoration program that we have going on with other preserves, and we have several projects going on in the region, and then we sort of repeat all that. So give you an idea of what that looks like. Here's our prescribed fire. One of them, I think this was 2013, 14 maybe, not quite sure, but then cutting hay, this was 12, 13 maybe, we cut hay. Pretty dry fall, so we were able to dig quite a lot. And then as far as restoration goes, we, one thing that is really kind of a cool part of, seeing this prairie and watching it mature and change and respond to management is the blooms that you see in different times of year and different conditions, which really leads into the final component, which is the restoration. So just a few pictures of some of the blooms that we've seen over the years have been particularly impressive. Susan earlier before the poll started mentioned Texas coneflower, and some of the lower areas can be quite amazing and colorful. Rattlesnake masters, you know, responds very well to the disturbance and can be quite thick on the prairie. We actually had a guy that was looking to cut hay for us, and he first refused to cut hay because he was worried about all the cockleburs. And I didn't know what he was talking about at first until he went out and he showed me all the rattlesnake masters. So I explained to him that no, rattlesnake master is, you know, is actually a good plant for forage, and you know, it is beneficial for hay. So, and then you have kind of our fall bloom, which is unique in itself, and just of a different type of bloom. That kind of golden brown is really neat to see in the fall, and the cooler weather moving in. Rosinweed can be, you know, quite plentiful at times, quite weedy. You can kind of see a lot of brown seed in there if you look closely between the rosinweed blooms. Curry parsley and rattlesnake master you see here kind of together. Slender gay feather. This is, I think we burned in the fall, and then the next year, the slender gay feather just went nuts, and it was pretty amazing. We found a few white varieties in there too, which is kind of neat. So all of that is really what has driven our restoration, and we use machines to harvest seed when we can. So this is kind of a picture of an early harvest. I think we're harvesting grass seed here in the fall, and we're really able to harvest, you know, several hundred pounds, thousands of pounds sometimes of seed, and it really is beneficial on a lot of projects that we use it on. Some more pictures here. This was a planting we did at Texas City. So we're loading seed into the hopper and broadcasting that out on the ground. And this particular restoration here has done quite well. Really responded positively to the planting and is doing well now. Just some of the seeds that we've harvested from the Nash and other preserves. Quite a list here. I won't go through them all, but one thing to note at Texas City, we're actually starting to harvest, you know, Texas coneflower, rattlesnake master, and rosinweed from Texas City, but those seeds came from Nash. So it's kind of neat to see, you know, areas that we're restoring now becoming areas that we can harvest seed from and kind of continue that process. Some of these things were, you know, kind of experimental, like snow on the prairie. I wouldn't recommend that. That was quite a interesting process and almost made us sick a little bit. So, kind of a interesting one there, but yeah, a lot of different seeds we're dealing with, and it's been neat to see those interact and come up and, you know, just kind of express themselves on our restoration plantings. I want to talk about invasive species for a minute. So I just sort of listed some of the common invasive species and kind of what, you know, my impressions of them are. I mean, basic grass is certainly kind of our number one right now. Highly invasive, probably our most abundant invasive species out there, and one of the most difficult to control just because of its prolific seed production, and it really likes really hard to find it and kill it before it produces seed, because it just produces seed so quickly and so early, even, you know, the February to all the way to December, it does its thing. So quite problematic, and you know, we have a lot of it in more of these degraded pastures. That's a bull pasture, the grazed pasture at one time, and this was the old crop field, so also quite common here. Occasionally along the roads, where we always look for, these are kind of common vectors of invasive roads. These interior old hay roads that were put in years ago are common places that hold invasives, so we try to monitor those frequently. Deep-rooted sedge occasionally. Johnson grass, we've really gotten a much better handle on that. We really attacked that early when we took over the property, and there was quite a big colony along this southern road here, and we're able to, pretty well get a handle on that for the most part, and popped up a few times in other places, but we've tried to be diligent about getting on that. So it's really not much of a problem anymore. Paraguayan windmill grass is pretty common too, especially along these interior roads. But fortunately, it's not highly invasive. It sort of, tends to stay put for the most part. But it'd still be nice to be able to take care of that one day. Angleton bluestem is one I really worry about, and fortunately, we don't have a lot of it. So we're able to keep it out for the most part, but that's one that could be quite problematic if we let it go. So we try to really prioritize that one. Same with Chinese tallow. It'd be highly invasive, but fortunately there's not a ton out there. So it's easier to sort of apply an ounce of prevention to it and try to keep it out rather than letting it go and dealing with it later. So and then we're into some native quote invasive. So invasive to the prairie, maybe not invasive, not native to the prairie, I should say, but not non-native to the region. So eastern baccharis is one that, especially along this kind of southern area up in here, it's really kind of taken root. So, fire alone doesn't seem to really, it does set it back, but it doesn't seem to kill it. So it's one we occasionally try to spray that off every once in a while. Same with live oak, especially along this meander here. Live oak tries to creep out every so often. So, fire obviously does check it, but doesn't kill it. So sometimes the application of herbicide can help finish that off and keep it confined to the area where it's at. And then the agara, tall agara, I'm not sure what species it is, but there's a very weedy agara that's about 6-8 feet tall, and it's also quite prevalent at times and can be.
You muted yourself, Aaron.
Okay, sorry.
You could say that.
Those are some of the invasive species that we deal with, and I'll keep going and move into prescribed fire. Maybe. There we go. Okay. So prescribed fire is definitely our main management tool on the prairie. It's kind of our go-to. And we try to be quite aggressive with our fire management. The most common fire myth that we deal with, and I don't know if anybody can guess it, but it kind of starts with, historically or traditionally, as many good myths do, and then it sort of goes into prairie burned in, and you fill in the blank with whatever season or month or time of year that you think it might have burned. So, and I say this is a myth. We've burned Nash almost every month between March and November. We rarely burn in the winter, and that's not because we don't want to. It just seems to happen that way. And the reason being that one, fire breaks are the main one. So, there's when can you get fire breaks in? Well, it's usually when it's dry. So, it can't be too wet. Otherwise, you're just rutting up, a good prairie and causing damage. So it tends to be when things start drying out and when the fuel is present. That's when we, start planning the fire. We start getting the fire plan together and putting in the fire breaks. And then once the fire breaks in, we really have to, be cognizant of crew availability. So, certainly certain times of year that, holidays and things like that, you're just not going to get the crew available to do the burning. So, so there's always that aspect too. So, prescribed fire really can't be just theory. You can sort of plan in your head all day long when you want to get fire in, but there's a very real practical and logical consideration to it too. That has to be part of your fire management program, and it certainly has been for us here. We've really tried to be aggressive, but we haven't. We're really worried about too much about the time of year more than the fuel's right to burn, and we have the crew available. And the prairie really has always responded positively to fire, no matter what time of year we burn. I've yet to be on a bad burn, at Ash Prairie. It just doesn't happen. Every time we burn, it just responds incredibly. And timing wise, it's really fuel driven. So, if there's enough fuel to carry a fire, it's, a good time to burn. And that typically takes 1 to 1.5 years. 1 year would be, you have to kind of get a lot of rain, but it's certainly possible. Year and a half maybe. So really kind of goes through, once it goes through a winter, really that's when it kind of browns out the grass starts, sinking down, kind of becoming a thatch layer underneath the next year's growth. And that really is what was going to carry a good fire and produce good effects. Top kill a lot of brush, really kind of hit reset on that successional process and open up space for your flowers and eventually grasses to germinate and come up and do well. As far as this question of can you burn sooner than 1 year apart? I mean, yes and no. I think yes, and that theoretically, I don't think it would hurt the prairie necessarily to do that, but I also don't think it would be very beneficial to do that. I think you would be, burning some very green, flowering prairie that you may not necessarily get a good effect on either, depending on your conditions. I mean, as far as our prescriptions go, we have to consider a lot of things like weather and like humidity, for example. If you in 20% humidity, you can burn rocks, but that's just never going to be part of our prescription. It's just that's a dangerous fire. So the conditions that we prescribe and that we burn in, it'd really be difficult to burn less than a year apart, having not gone through that winter. And recently, back in 2 months ago now, late June, we conducted our largest burn in ash, which we burned the whole thing. That's the first time we've done that. And the reason we did that was because we had to catch up from COVID. We were really shut down. Our whole fire program was shut down during COVID, and we lost people. And it was a big, really hurt and really set us back on our management. And so, we felt like we had to catch up. And so we're finally able to sort of get the momentum back, get burning again in different parts of the state. So we burned the whole thing back in June, and it was a really impressive fire. It was the day before I think the burn ban went in, and it's the best effects that I've ever seen on the prairie in terms of pretty incredible. I thought there were trees that were scorched that I thought would just never be touched, just because we never in any of our prior burns ever produced a hot enough fire to really to do anything to it. But it was really impressive. Slammed into some of these brush moths and almost went through some of them. Top killed some pretty big trees and tallow that was growing in that bull pasture. So it was a really impressive fire, and I think it's responding really well. And I did mention burn bans, and we have burned in burn bans and out of burn bans. And, we do have, we work with the counties in a lot of these areas to get exemptions to burn during burn bans. And if we feel, we can safely do it and it would be ecologically beneficial, we're usually go for it and burn. And, it also helps reduce fuel. So it kind of reduces that risk of wildfire as well. And that's highlighted by a recent wildfire we had in Wani Prairie earlier this month, I think it was. We were actually someone was cutting hay out there, and a baler, threw a spark and it started a wildfire. So, kind of ironic. We were trying to reduce fuel and ended up, creating this bad situation. Burned over 400 acres and threatened homes. Fortunately, no homes were burned. No structures were lost. So, could have been a lot worse, but it's definitely eye-opening, and kind of just emphasizes the importance of prescribed burning to reduce the risk of these types of wildfires. Okay, so switch gears a little bit. So this is, I thought, might be kind of neat to kind of go through, a year in the prairie, so to speak, by photo. So this is sort of a little collage I put together, a while back, and I think it kind of shows this the cycle of the prairie. So this is this October 2013 when we're going to start this. So you see the prairie here, it's, looking good, but, dense grasses, you see some brush back there. So, it's starting to get a little thick. And as winter, all that browns out, and that grass turns into thatch. And so we burn in March of 2014. You see now the grass looks brown. So it's gone through that winter, it's browned out, it's really, really dry. So it's burn that off. Let's see here, some of the fire photos. So, day after the fire looks like the moon. Real black and, bleak, but that's a good canvas for new plants to start growing on. So you see a little bit, in 2 weeks, a little over 2 weeks, you start seeing, pretty good green up. 2 months, it's like you hardly ever burned. You don't see any of the leftover, soot or anything from the burn. So things are really looking green. A month later, things are really blooming. You see rosinweed, brown seed, things are really starting to bloom, do well. See the rattlesnake master's already full bloom. 2 months later, Beatrice is in full bloom. Switchgrass is doing well out there. Rattlesnake master's already starting to go to seed. And late August, you're seeing big blue stem. You see Beatrice is still there. Fall grasses are starting to push up. Other area of the prairie, some blue salvia, and I think this is rattlesnake master here, getting ready to drop seed any day. And then here we are, almost a year later, October 2014, and you kind of into that fall, that fall canvas, that yellowing in grass, big blue stem, little blue stem, kind of this typical fall collection of grasses. So we're in the fall bloom now. So that's kind of a typical year, of succession. And when we're able to do fire, it really, kind of resets that process. So, and you can tell in years when we don't do fire, it doesn't hurt the prairie necessarily, but it doesn't produce these, kind of amazing blooms that you see. All right. Well, I guess that's went a little quicker than I thought I would, but I guess when I'm not taking questions during the talk, it goes a little quicker. So yeah, we have some time for questions. Happy to go through maybe Beth, do you want to go through the chat, or do you want me to? Or
I can go through. And someone, let's see, what do we have? What methods? I lost the chat. Where'd the chat go? Hang on, I found it. There it is. Okay. What's the smallest area you've burned?
Smallest burn we did was that bull pasture. So that would have been, or no, that corn whiskey. So that would have been 40 acres.
40 acres. Okay. And the largest, I guess, was probably the whole 345 acres of Nash, huh?
Yeah.
So have you burned larger prairies otherwise elsewhere in Texas?
Yes. Yeah. Climber Meadow is a blackland prairie preserve. So, we burned, I mean, that whole preserve is, almost a couple thousand acres, and we burned, or maybe 800 acres in a day, probably like 600 acre units sometimes. And then Mad Eye was probably the most we've done. So that's definitely the largest burns we've done. And actually that's we burned 1,000+ acre units in a day. And we've kind of been catching up there too. We burned I think 4,000 or 5,000 acres of that 7,000 acre prairie this year.
But not all at one time.
All within 2 months.
Yeah. And so do you have like fire trucks standing by?
No, we have our fire trucks and fire equipment.
You have your own. Oh, okay. Okay, but do you alert, I guess you alert the local fire department in case it gets out of hand?
We let a lot of officials know, the day we're burning. We have to let TCEQ and local, volunteer fire departments or city departments and dispatches and fire marshals.
Yeah,
there's
I would.
notifications to be made, neighbors, things like that. So.
Yeah. And then what methods? Oh, let me go back to state this. In the years that you don't burn, do you mow? And when do you mow?
We haven't mowed the National Milwaukee because we haven't had to. The mowing, we do mow at Texas City a lot, just because we can't do fire and we can't hay because of the type of prairie is the Gulf cordgrass, type of prairie. So not good for haying. And so we do a lot of mowing, and it produces a good result, but not as good as fire or haying. So we try to stick with that for national wanting, because that really gives us the most benefit.
Okay. And then what methods have you used to control the invasive grasses? And you said you're herbicided, but do you herbicide? Like, I know there's a particular herbicide for Johnson grass, supposedly. Are you being very specific on the herbicides you're using, or are you just doing sort of a glyphosate, simple solution, or what are you doing?
Yeah, usually a simple glyphosate solution, and then we just try to get it on those plants. Although, our manager in North Texas, Brandon, he started using Outrider on Johnson grass, and he's had good luck with that. So, that's expensive herbicide, but you don't use a lot of it. So I've heard good things about that one as well.
What about your woodies? Or you have trouble with any wax myrtle? What are you using on wax myrtle?
No, not wax myrtle at Nash or Milwaukee.
Yeah, but anywhere else though.
Yeah, we have those at the city, but
yeah, we have a wax myrtle issue with Deer Park. So
yeah,
what about
at Texas City a lot, and we we'll use some sort of brush herbicide and kind of do IPT as well. We do a lot with the ATV sprayer, drive around and kind of foliar treat those plants, and that seems to work pretty well.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. So Fortenberry says, do you sell the hay, or does the person doing the haying get all the hay?
We've done different ways. So we did one of our first hay cuttings we did was actually a partnership with Fish and Wildlife Service. They wanted some seed hay, so we got lucky, I guess, and we were able to cut in the fall that year, which is not a normal thing. So it kind of worked out that we were able to cut in the fall when the grasses were seeding out, and that hay went to a restoration project on somewhere on the San Bernard Refuge. But normally we try to be hands off as possible, just because of our time is limited. So, we'll try to work out a deal with the hay cutter and, do like a license, and they might pay us a little bit of money and take the hay for their cattle.
And then Noreen's asked, when you mow, do you then dethatch?
No, not at Texas City. We don't. That just kind of goes on the ground, and a lot of plants are able to push up through that. Unfortunately, not all plants and not as many. So, we do get a good flush, good fork response from mowing, but it's definitely not as good as fire or hay cutting when you get that thatch off.
Mhm. Okay, so at Texas City, do y'all sort of mow one year and hay the next year, or is it? Why wouldn't you keep haying you hay once a year or twice a year? Or?
No, we're really not able to cut hay at Texas City. It's just not the.
Oh, you don't cut. Okay.
Too much cordgrass, too much brush. It's just the hay cutters get pretty fickle with their, and understandably so, because their equipment.
Oh,
can't take some of the stuff. So.
Okay, I'm sorry. And where did you say you were haying and using the hay for seed?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Where did you say you hayed and used the hay for seed?
At Nashbury.
At Nash. Okay, sorry, I missed that. Okay, and then Gail says, when do you mow at Texas City?
Whenever it's dry.
Whenever it's dry. Okay. Summer, winter, just whenever. Okay. I think I got everybody's questions. Anybody else? Any other questions? So Aaron, you're managing Nash, Watney, Texas City. What else are you doing?
Well, so I'm sort of co-managing Nash and Watney now with a guy named Callan Coleman, and he works out of our Victoria office. So we sort of we tag team it, and he's been a big help. So we've been able to spend some time. Both of us spent some time there, and then I manage Texas City Prairie Preserve, and then a few preserves that we own and don't manage or don't need management. So Elm Grove is a coastal marsh. Same with what's the name of that? Over there by Swan Lake, but Pierce Marsh. There you go. Kind of by Hitchcock. So another marsh preserve that doesn't need management. So and then some projects in the area that I run. Some in Houston and other places.
Okay. All right. One more question from Shannon. Does Nature Conservancy offer help to private landowners who are looking to restore prairie? If so, what kind?
Yeah. It really depends on where you're located, and certainly I'm always happy to answer questions and give advice. That's easy enough. But as far as like material assistance, we don't usually, unless it fits within some of our criteria for for just areas that we're working in. But Texas Parks and Wildlife, there's a lot of other agencies that do give quite a bit of material assistance. And so if there's there's a lot of programs out there that provide money and assistance for prairie restoration. And so if you're interested in any of that, I'm happy to put you in touch with folks that can put enroll you in those programs, or at least give you the information on them.
All right.
Beth, there's a question from Noreen.
Okay. Do you use volunteers to burn, and do you train?
We do. Well, I would say yes, we do use volunteers for burns, but not many, because they have to go through this certification. We use NWCG standards, so you can look up NWCG online. It's the federal agencies use those same standards, and state agencies have gone to those, and we use those as well. And so it requires some courses and some physical training, to get certified to be able to participate on our burn. So everyone that's on our burn has to be NWCG certified, because of our policies and standards. So we do have a couple volunteers though that have done that, have gone through those and gotten the training and done the PAC test, you know, the physical fitness test that you have to do to qualify. So yeah, that's something we've done before.
Yeah, I think I read that once. It was a lot. It was a lot. It was like, you know, carrying backpacks and running across and stuff. It was pretty intimidating.
Yeah, they call it the red card, you know, red card certification or PAC test, and it's you have 60-pound backpack, and you have to walk 3 minutes.
Yeah.
How far?
3 miles in under 45 minutes. So it's a brisk walk with a pretty heavy pack.
Yeah. So then Morgenstern asked about buying hay. So if you hay Nash, is there an opportunity for private landowners to buy hay for the seed?
Potentially, yeah. You know, in past years too, another way we worked it is, you know, we'll have someone selected to cut hay for us, and we might, you know, allow them to take all the bales, but then we will put people in touch with the hay cutters, and so they can, you know, buy directly from them. So that's worked in the past. You know, and it depends how many bales you need. I think they'd be happy to, you know, generally in years where there's not a drought, you know, they're happy to sell, you know, sell all kinds of hay to you. So
yeah. Well, Mark's down in that area. So Mark, did that answer your question? I don't know. Bob, can you unmute Mark?
With the burn, so everything's burned right now. Like the Nash is completely burned, Wani's completely burned. So you know, the soonest we would cut hay would be, you know, next year. But you know, even then, you know, we have to also kind of let the prairie go through the blooms and do it too. So
Sure. Would you be the person to about that for Mark if he wants to do that? I don't know if you know Mark, but he's down right there in that area. He hasn't. Yeah, you know. Okay. Any other questions? I don't see any more. Aaron, thank you very much. I've always sort of wondered where Montney were. So I've been to Nash, but I wasn't sure about Montney. So how do they contact you, Aaron?
I'll put my information in the chat here.
Okay.
Yeah. Great.
I'll do that right now. I'll spell my. I'll put my phone number there. So. Yeah, that should be in the chat, everyone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's in the chat. People can save the chat if they want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, Aaron, again, thank you very much. I really appreciate this, and it's very interesting to hear.
Yes.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you all.
And you guys, if you haven't been down there to the prairie, there'll possibly be some tours with the Coastal Prairie seminar that we're having in October. So I think Sharon's going to lead that. So, all right. Thank you.
So if you're in the area, it's time to stop by. You know, we've just been getting rain after that fire, so things are really popping now. So, you know, both prairies from public roads, so you know, feel free to stop on by.
All right. Good night, everybody. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.